Hello and welcome. Australia has the most domestic airline seats per person in the world. Australia relies heavily on air transport. Most cities in Australia are a day or more away by car. From Perth, West Australia, I drive 1.5 days to the east just to get to my state border and another day to reach Adelaide. Norman Brearley in 1921 recognised that this was an opportunity to start Western Australian Airways. Across on the east coast, young Reg Ansett was just 10 years of age. There is no doubt that the adventures of Brearley, Charles Kingsford-Smith and Horry Miller would have attracted Reg's attention. Reg Ansett, from humble beginnings in education, became a giant in business, aviation and transport, but not many know his full story. Sir Reginald Miles Ansett was born in Inglewood in Victoria in 1909. His father had a bicycle repair shop that evolved into a garage. Leaving school at age 14, Reg went to work for his father whilst attending Swinburne Technical College. He took flying lessons at age 20, gaining his pilot's licence. He worked as a labourer in the Northern Territory for the next year before returning to Victoria to purchase a second-hand Studebaker car to ferry freight and passengers. That was a taxi service. Ansett bought extra cars to establish new routes in the Western District of Victoria. In 1932, the Victorian Minister of Railways, Robert Menzies, later to become Prime Minister, introduced the Transport Regulation Board to protect the railways from competition, refused a licence to operate between Hamilton and Melbourne by road. In 1935, Ansett registered Ansett Airways and purchased a 6-seat Fokker Universal. The Hamilton to Melbourne air service, begun in February 1936, was unprofitable, so Ansett made ends meet by taking people for joyrides and by giving aerobatic displays and flying lessons. Backed by local graziers, Ansett acquired an 8-seat airspeed Envoy in August 1936. His aim was to develop a network of air routes linking Melbourne, Mildura, Adelaide, Sydney, Broken Hill and Narrandera. In 1937, he floated Ansett Airways and moved his headquarters to Essendon in Melbourne. While the road transport side of his business was generating surpluses, the airline was not. Later that year, he bought 3 Lockheed Electras for £50,000. By 1938, the value of those £1 Ansett Airways shares had dropped to 8 shillings 6pence. The chairman recommended that holders accept an offer by Australian National Airways to buy the company for 8 shillings 10pence per share. At a meeting of shareholders, the 29-year-old Ansett opposed his chairman and the attempted takeover failed. In February 1939, a fire swept through the company's Essendon aerodrome and destroyed several aircraft, including one of the new Electras. With the aid of Commonwealth Government subsidies paid to all commercial airlines, Ansett Airways resumed its Melbourne-Sydney services, which had been stopped because of the fire, and quickly recovered lost ground. During World War II, Ansett's business expanded. All domestic services other than the Hamilton-Melbourne run were suspended and the aircraft diverted to charter work for the federal government and the American Armed Forces. Government aid helped the airline to double its hangar capacity. A manufacturing division was formed to make aircraft parts, including Beaufort gun turrets. New hangars and engineering shops were built, and by 1943, 2,000 people were working for Ansett. 3 years later, however, the airline was surviving on government subsidies and employment had declined to 300. Ansett restructured his business, forming Ansett Transport Industries as a holding company for Ansett Airways, Pioneer Tourist Coaches, Pioneer Tourist Hotels, Ansett and Air Express. At the end of the war, Ansett expected that his airline would be the major competitor for Australian National Airways, but the new government-owned Trans-Australia Airlines quickly assumed this position. Challenges in the High Court of Australia to the Chifley government's airline policy removed restrictions against interstate operations, and Ansett seized the opportunity to extend his services, particularly to the holiday destinations in Queensland and Tasmania. This initiative complemented his growing coach and hotel businesses. By 1948, Ansett Transport Industries was the largest operator of hotels in Australia. Yet, Ansett believed himself to be at the crossroads and unable to topple ANA without the resources available to the government-owned TAA. He offered to sell his airline to the Australian National Airlines Commission, but the parties could not agree on a price, and Ansett decided to stay in the industry. Increased government charges in 1947 for the use of aerodromes and navigation aids forced Ansett into a more aggressive approach. His competitors sought to recoup their costs through higher fares. Ansett responded by increasing the seating capacity of his planes and reducing cabin services. When the Commonwealth Government attempted to force him to raise his price in line with TAA and ANA, he refused, claiming that it was illegal for the government to dictate interstate fares. Legal opinion supported his stand. In 1948, he negotiated a contract with Collier's Interstate Transport Service to carry its freight exclusively, enabling him to use his fleet of Douglas DC-3s as freight carriers by night and passenger planes by day. In 1952, the Menzies government introduced the Civil Aviation Agreement Act, which was designed to reserve the main interstate routes for the two major airlines. Ansett resolved to take business from ANA, the weaker of the two. He purchased new aircraft in 1954, gradually upgraded his cabin service and discounted fares. ANA could not compete. When the founder, Sir Ivan Hollyman, died in January 1957, Ansett closed in and bought the company for £3.3 million. After he took over ANA, Ansett waged a brutal battle for control of his main regional rivals. The Commonwealth Government wanted to stabilise the interstate airline industry and in 1958 barred other companies from flying the main trunk routes. Under this two-airline policy, Ansett-ANA, later Ansett Airlines of Australia, and TAA were made equal in the types of aircraft operated, seat capacity and scheduling. As a result, there was little difference between them. In the 1960s and 1970s, Ansett's business empire expanded to encompass television stations in Melbourne and Brisbane. Although he was firmly in control of the day-to-day management of his conglomerate, he only owned about 1% of the shares in Ansett Transport Industries. In April 1972, Thomas Nationwide Transport attempted to buy a controlling interest in Ansett Transport Industries for $44 million. The Victorian state government of Sir Henry Bolte legislated to delay the takeover. TNT withdrew its bid and its managing director, Sir Peter Abels, was elected to ATI's board. After he retired from Parliament, Bolte also joined the board. Make of that as you will. Other challenges confronted Ansett in the 1970s. In March 1975, air hostesses went on strike, prompting Ansett's regrettable remark that they were a batch of old boilers sitting on their executive. His opposition to the recruitment of women as pilots ended with the decision of the High Court in 1979 ordering him to employ Debra Wardley as a trainee. She had applied in 1975 with over 1,688 hours flying and instructing experience. She was also a Bachelor of Maths, Physics and Chemistry. She had seen her male pupils accepted by Ansett. Ansett's arguments were that men and women were incompatible flying together and they did not want to employ somebody who was not good looking. A lack of physical strength in case of hydraulic failure and pregnancy and childbirth disruption were cited. What Ansett didn't expect was public backlash. The first to respond was the Women's Electoral Lobby in Perth, which donated half her legal costs. Ansett's ticket sales dropped 70%, those passengers taken up by TAA, who, ironically, didn't accept female pilots until a year after the Ansett decision. Ansett Transport Industries decided to invest in the Avis rent-a-car business. This made him a competitor to his son Bob, who ran Budget Rent-a-Car.
Variety is the spice of life, which is why Budget caters for individual tastes. We've got the range and the rates to drive your dollar further.
Bob was his son from his first wife and had grown up in America. Bob successfully opposed his father's attempt to maintain monopoly rights to hire car rental desks at airports. ATI had acquired 46% of finance company ASL, and when ASL collapsed, the loss made ATI vulnerable to takeover. Robert Holmes' the Court Bell Group was buying large numbers of shares in ATI. Thomas Nationwide Transport immediately acted to increase its stake in Ansett's company. T&T had been managed by Peter Abel since 1967. Several other buyers entered the market, most importantly Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation. The ensuing fight for control ended in December and left ATI in the hands of Abels and Murdoch. They persuaded Ansett to stay on as chairman. Each day he commuted by helicopter between his home in Mount Eliza and his office in Melbourne. Espousing the interests and championing the virtues of private enterprise, he saw no contradiction in attacking the publicly funded, loss-making Victorian Railways, a competitor for his road transport business, while his air transport operation enjoyed the protection of the federal government's two airline policy. Sir Reginald died in 1981. He didn't live to see the 1989 Australian pilots dispute, which paved the way for airline industry deregulation. Ansett Australia collapsed in 2001, a victim to Sir Peter Abel's incompetence combined with Rupert Murdoch's hands-off approach and a government decision to merge Australian Airlines with Qantas. In 2004, Virgin Blue Chief Executive Brett Godfrey said that his airline was carrying more passengers than Ansett had, with only one-third the staff. Virgin Blue employed 3,300 staff against Ansett's 10,000 for its domestic trunk route division. What's more, the Virgin staff were paid on average 50% less than Ansett's. The fleet productivity of Virgin was also way higher. In 2004, the airline had almost 40 737NGs, while Ansett's mainline fleet in 2001 was made up of 52 767s, 737s and A320s. Ansett, at union insistence, had configured its Boeing 767s with a 3-crew flight deck, the only 76 customer in the world to do so. So Ansett Airlines became a case study for students of what not to do in business. Thank you for watching.